Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Lucas. Today, January 28, 2025, we are welcoming our colleague from the City of London, in the province of Ontario, here in Canada. Lucas is part of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society and is also one of the directors of the Canadian Spiritist Council. And today Lucas will bring us some reflections on the law of society. How to understand the law of society. Let's now turn it over to Fabio, our colleague here at the house, who will open our work with a reading and a prayer. Thank you. Good evening to everyone here present, everyone online. Good evening, Lucas. Thank you once again for providing us with this lecture. I will read message number 53 from the book Path, Truth, and Life, psychographed by Chico Xavier by the Spirit Emmanuel. Peace. Then Jesus said to them again, Peace be with you. John 20:21. Many people, restless in examining the disembodied, anxiously inquire about the possibilities of spiritual collaboration with human activities. Why don't the emissaries of the invisible provide sensational discoveries to the world? Why don't they reveal the processes of curing the ailments that challenge science? Why don't they prevent the painful clash between nations? Such investigators, distanced from notions of justice, do not understand that it would be terrible to deprive man of the elements of work, redemption, and elevation. They are commonly annoyed by the repeated and affectionate recommendations of peace from communications beyond the grave because they have not yet harmonized with Christ. Let's look at the Master with the disciples when he did not return to comfort them from the spiritual plane. When he returned to comfort them from the spiritual plane, we do not observe in his words any toward his message. He does not establish the slightest expression of sensationalism. He does not advance in concepts of supernatural revelation. Jesus demonstrates to them survival and wishes them peace. Is this enough for the sincere soul seeking integration with the higher life? Doesn't it involve great responsibility to recognize the continuation of existence beyond death, in the certainty that there will be an examination of individual commitments? Working and suffering constitute logical processes of improvement and ascension, and that, if we attend to these imperatives of the law, with enough peace, it is the loving and pure desire of Jesus Christ. Let us strive to understand such truths, for there are numerous learners awaiting great signs, like the lazy who breathe in the shade waiting for the fire of the least effort. So, friends, this very reflective message, I invite everyone to calm our minds, soothe our hearts, and thus thank the Divine Master Jesus, our mentor Meimei, and all the spirits who help us in conducting these works, and ask them to enlighten us, envelop us in an environment of peace, harmony, to inspire our speaker of the night, who once again made himself available to bring us a bit of his knowledge, so that all this content brought to us during this period collaborates and is a determining factor in our improvement and moral transformation. So be it. Thank God. Lucas, it's over to you, dear friend. Thank you, Fabio. Good evening. Thank you, Aline, for the invitation. I'm happy to be back here, Meimei. Thank you to everyone who is watching us. At Aline's invitation, I will talk today about the law of progress. One of the divine laws, as she told me. The Meimei group was already studying the divine laws in the Spirit's book. Recently they were studying this law. So we will complement here, with a little bit of my knowledge, So, I will start by going back a little and talking about what a law is, because we are going to talk specifically about the law of progress. So, for those who know a little about law, already study law, I studied law. One of the first things we learn when studying is to know what a law is. Because it's no use studying the laws without knowing what a law is. So, a law is a rule, any prescription, issued by a sovereign authority. In the case of a country, Congress makes laws and the executive sometimes. So, we humans have several laws. The human laws, the Mosaic laws, which Moses brought us, are laws that we make according to our needs. And they are subject to change. Any change in our needs, these human laws can transform. They can cease to exist. They can become more rigorous, prohibit something, or even encourage something. So they change over time and space, according to our needs. The divine laws, however, were created by the sovereign authority of the universe, God, the supreme intelligence of the universe, as the first question of the Spirit's book says. These divine laws, however, are not like human laws. They are not subject to changes according to our wills. These laws are eternal. They are immutable, just, and natural. And it couldn't be different because they are like the one who created them, God. And how do we divide these natural laws, these cosmic laws that apply to everyone? The Spirit's book, Kardec brought a division, one that doesn't necessarily have to be absolute, as he himself brings in the book. These cosmic or natural laws, they are eternal, because they have existed forever. Since the creation of the universe, we have the law of gravity, and even if we can say so its end, the law of gravity is always in force. We cannot say, oh, let's pause gravity for a while for our benefit, right? Sometimes it would be good for us not to fall, stay in the air, so it would be good, but they are eternal laws. Like most natural laws, the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, these laws are also just, because they do not choose for a certain person it will be such a law, for another group another law. They are the same for all of us humans, for animals, for plants, all. For example, diametrically speaking, the physical body, it will deteriorate for men, for animals, for plants, for any living being. And they are natural, right? Because they come from God, from nature. We don't need to plan, we don't need to wait. They will happen like, for example, the law of reproduction. Animals and plants will reproduce naturally. So, there's a whole process. These laws are divine, as I said, because they come from God, their author. We have already classified them, as humans, as physical laws and moral laws. These physical laws are easier to understand because they are the laws we study through science. We study physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics. They are responsible for explaining the regular, the movement, the transformation of us, or all beings, with raw matter. As I said, like I used gravity as an example before, we understand it today, but 300 years ago it already existed, but we simply didn't know, didn't have a name for it, didn't know how it worked, just like the other laws of physics. As for moral laws, they concern us as beings, especially intelligent beings, our relationships with ourselves, with others, and, of course, with the Creator, with God, with our fellow beings. And these moral laws are studied not only by Spiritism, but by practically any religion we look into. In Christianity, in Judaism, these laws are present. All speak of love, all speak of respect, of evolution, of progress. They speak of work in different degrees. but all deal in some way with these divine laws. Whether they are, we say they are given by God, by Allah, or any other religion that brings these laws. But they are laws that are present for everyone in our relationships. Kardec, logically, wanting to understand more, went to ask the spirits about these laws. So we see in the spirits' book the 10 laws he placed there dictated by the spirits. But before the laws, he asks what we should understand. This is in question 614, by natural law. What do we understand by natural law? And the spirits clearly respond that the natural law is the law of God, the law of nature, the law of God. And it is the only true one for the happiness of man. They continue saying that it indicates what he should do or refrain from doing, and he is only unhappy when he strays from it. So, if we stop to think, if we stray from work, if we stray from progress, from the law of love, from the law of society, right? This brings us consequences, but we have these choices, right? To be able to act according to the laws of God. It is not a divine punishment if we don't have what we don't want, or it is contrary to what we want. It is simply because we are straying from what God wants us to do. These laws, we might even think, oh, but I don't know, I wasn't aware. So, one thing we learn in law is that, regardless of us knowing, the law is valid, right? So, if we are in any country, we arrive in a country to visit, and in this country, whatever it may be, you cannot bring a certain object, substance, etc. Whether we know it or not, this will not change. You don't have the excuse, oh, I didn't know, so the law will allow this to change. Oh, you didn't know, alright, then you can bring in food. In Brazil, for example, the law does not allow unprocessed foods to be brought into, for example, not harm agriculture. So, regardless of knowledge, the law is valid. But what about divine law? How do we become aware of it, right? Who has the knowledge of this natural law? Because there is nothing written about the law of progress, the law of society. So, Kardec also asks, right? In the Spirit's book, in question 619, and he asks like this: has God given all men the means to know his law, right? So, regardless of where men are, societies, right? The peoples, all will know this law, and the spirits respond that all can know it, but not all understand it. So, they also say that good men and those who decide to investigate it are the ones who understand it best. All, however, will understand it one day, for progress must occur if progress is to be made. So, regardless of knowing Spiritism and reading there in the book about moral laws, Catholic, Protestant, in a temple, all will bring, in some way, these laws. All have always brought them, and all societies have sought to have at least a minimum of laws. So, regardless of who it is, wherever they live, the knowledge of these laws will reach us, speaking of love, speaking of respect, of progress, of living in society, of reproduction, of work. Now, understanding, wanting to know is one thing, understanding is another. Many times, and we see this a lot in our society, that most people don't want to understand, because it's easier to have a rule, to have a written law, and to simply comply without having to examine, without having to think. So, this happens a lot today. For example, we see a very recurring situation in the current world, that some people with a certain power simply decide something, have the power for it, decide that something is right or wrong according to their understanding, because they simply don't understand, because if they truly understood, they wouldn't have to impose this law, it would occur naturally. But we see today, very clearly, many people trying to impose their thoughts, their power, their decisions. So, in society, this causes problems, because moral laws, going back a little to moral laws in general, they refer to the creature's relationship with God, the relationship with oneself, our intimate changes, the relationship with others, with the whole society, and it says that the first law, the law of worship, including what? Moses brought would be to love God above all things, the first commandment. So, of the divine laws, according to the Spirit's book, we have the law of worship, the law of work, the law of reproduction, the law of preservation, the law of destruction, the law of society, of progress, of equality, of freedom, of justice, love, and charity. Kardec also asks the spirits what they think of the division of natural laws into 10 parts, comprising these 10 I just mentioned. In fact, when he asks what they think, the spirits are clear. He doesn't really want to know what they think. He actually wants the spirits to explain, because for him, as a human, it's still a little difficult to understand. So, yes, what do you think about the division? That is, explain more, and the spirits explain. They say that this division of God's law into 10 parts is from Moses, right? We have the 10 commandments, and they encompass or can encompass all the circumstances of our lives, which is essential. But adopting it this way, like all human classification systems, they are flawed, they can change, so it depends on the perspective, it depends on the way we are viewing these laws. And they also say that the last law is the most important, as it allows man to advance more in spiritual life, since it summarizes all the others. The last one is the law of justice, love, and charity. Just as we also see that the law of love from Jesus, that Jesus speaks of love, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you are practically loving God and fulfilling all the other laws. They're getting more into the law of society. Before we talk about the law, what is a society? For those who study sociology, or have studied, or have read something, it is the understanding of a group of people who inhabit a certain space, at a certain time, and have relationships among themselves. That is society. So, this society can be large, can be small, complex or not, developed, that is, the very name of avisocio. We are owners of something in common. It can be a territory, a language, cultures, knowledge, and this has existed since the beginning of humanity. When the caveman emerged, they did not live alone, because man, to survive, needed help from others to hunt, to protect themselves from animals, to reproduce. So, this law is a law that came naturally, since the beginning of humanity on our planet. So it is one of the oldest natural laws. But for what? What is the need to have a social life? Living in society means having assistance in our life, in our intellectual exchange, in our intellectual development, but also in our moral development. Through the exchange of knowledge, experiences, help among people, this leads to progress in science, technology, so we advance intellectually, materially, which is one of the objectives. One of the laws is the law of progress, but it also helps in our spiritual and moral improvement, which occurs how? From our inner reform. So, going back a little to the 10 laws, why does this law of society come before the law of progress, before the law of equality, and before the law of freedom? The answer is simple, because if we are not in society, there is no progress, there is no equality, there is no reason to have equality, if everyone is for themselves. There is no freedom, if we do what we want, there is no deprivation of freedom, and there will also be neither love, nor justice, nor charity, because we wouldn't need them. So, Kardec asks, later in the book, in question 766, about social life. He asks if social life is in nature. Is it part of it? Does social life belong to nature? Is it in nature? And the spirits respond that certainly. That God made man to live in society. He did not give him speech uselessly and all the faculties necessary for a life of relationships. So, if we stop to think, if it weren't like this, we wouldn't even need to speak, we wouldn't be able to speak. We would be like irrational animals that emit a sound, a noise, some type of more crude communication. If we have speech to be used, if we have intelligence to communicate, if we have writing, what good would it be if there was no one to communicate with? So, all this that we have, it makes sense for us to live with others, to be in society. And this is part of the divine plan. And he continues in the next question, 767, asking about isolation. In fact, he uses the word insolamento. He asks if absolute isolation is contrary to the law of nature. Insolamento comes from insular, from island, that people use to isolate themselves, perhaps, more commonly on islands. And we can remember that movie Cast Away. He was there alone on an island for a long time, and he didn't even have anyone to talk to. He talked to a volleyball, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Wilson. So, this absolute isolation, which perhaps was common in the past, the hermits, the recluses who isolated themselves in a corner of the world, perhaps thinking that this was better. So, is this isolation natural? He asks. And the spirits respond, if it is contrary to the law of nature. They say that, without a doubt, it is contrary to the law of nature. Because by instinct, men seek society and all must contribute to progress, helping each other. So, once again, he is saying that we must live in society. So, living in society is a necessity. In the next question, 768, he also continues talking about society. He asks, by seeking society, is man doing more than obeying a personal feeling? Or is there in this feeling some providential objective of a more general order? So why does man seek society, to be in society? Because he wants something from it? Is it selfishness? Is it the objective? Or is there some other providence? So, they respond that man has to progress, that's our goal. Isolated, that's not possible for him, because he doesn't have all the faculties. Contact with other men is necessary. In isolation, he becomes brutish and withers. So, that's the answer. We become brutish, we even get ugly, because I, for example, don't know how to cut hair. If I had to live alone, I'd have a mop of hair this big, as they say in Brazil, and we'd get even uglier. Who would take care of our beauty, our body, help us with clothes? And we also, they use the term wither, which means to deteriorate, a botanical term. Imagine if we lived alone and didn't have someone to take care of our health, someone with knowledge, a doctor, right? So, when he says that no man possesses complete faculties, it means we don't know everything, we're not capable of everything as human beings. And the purest truth is, we don't know everything. We can't be a doctor, lawyer, judge, cook, all at the same time and be self-sufficient. So, it's through this social union that we complete ourselves to ensure the well-being of everyone and the progress of all. So, we need each other, we are made to live in society and not isolated. So, if we stop to think about today's society, we can clearly see that there's a lot of pressure for personal success, for certain professions in society, like doctor, engineer, lawyer, judge, or anything like that. But let's stop to reflect a little. Imagine if we only had doctors, lawyers, and an engineer, for example. Everyone was that. If you're not sick, you don't need a doctor. If you don't do anything wrong or don't need anything in a process, you also don't need a lawyer. Maybe you need one once in a lifetime, or if you're of a certain age, you need a doctor. Now, who can live without food? Without cooks? Who can live without transportation? I don't know how to fly a plane, nor a bus. Who can live without a garbage collector? That we sometimes don't value the street sweepers, garbage collectors, and those who take care of recycling. Imagine the mess our cities would be. But we don't value them. Yet we need a garbage collector, a street sweeper, sometimes much more than a lawyer or an engineer. Not to belittle any profession, but there are professions we don't value in our society. Why? Because of selfishness, because of pride. It's easier to appear more, maybe, logically, because of income. So, social life is a natural obligation. God made man to live in society, gave us the word, as Kardec said, and in the very book of spirits, he divides this law into 3 parts. First, the necessity of social life, which we've seen a little already. Then, the life of isolation and the vow of silence. And third, family ties. Moving on to the necessity of social life, spirituality says that man must progress. That alone we can't, because we don't have all the faculties, we don't have all the knowledge, instruments. We come here several times through reincarnation, and each time we learn just a little. Even having lived various existences, we don't remember and don't know, can't do everything, right? So, we need contact with other men, and in isolation, again, that doesn't happen. So, this union is necessary, right? The life of isolation. The next item, continuing this theme, Kardec asks, in question 770, if there is any merit, right, in imposing this retreat on oneself. We might think, many people say today, oh, I don't believe, I don't trust humans, I trust animals, my dog, the cat, so I'll live hidden, isolated, in a corner, just with the animals. All right, that's good, maybe it brings peace, the contemplation of nature, divine worship, all right, that's good. But why would we do that? Why do we do that? He says that in moral laws doing more good than harm is the best atonement. So, if we avoid a harm, which is individuality, we fall into another. If we avoid, I'm not going to live with my family because I have problems with my mother, my father, my brother, my uncle, so it's better to live isolated from everyone, because that way I don't fight, I don't curse anyone, I don't have relationship problems. It's valid to want not to have problems, but if we don't face them, we also forget to progress. We can't practice the law of love, the law of charity, the law of justice, of progress, among others. So, we choose one harm to move to another. So, that's not how it works. This life of isolation doesn't work for us anymore. Even though we see that there are still villages that live isolated, for example, in the Amazon, it's not an isolated Indian, they are villages, they are groups, they need help to survive, they need to live in a society, maybe a simpler society at that moment, but that increasingly unites with the general society, the world. And Emmanuel talks about this in the book Rotero. There's a chapter 32 that talks about collaboration. And Emmanuel says, a plain coat, an ordinary coat, is the result of the combined effort of the thread, the loom, the needle, and the tailor, solving the problem of clothing. So, the tailor only has work if he has the thread, if he has the loom and the needle. The needle will only be useful if there is a thread to make a fabric. The loom will only work if there is a thread. So, if you are a great tailor or seamstress, that's great, but without fabric, without someone to make a needle, without someone to make the loom and a fabric, the tailor has no work. So, here's another clear example of how our material achievements are the result of life in society, right? So, these revelations that the spirits bring us, these new revelations, they invite us to reflect on the role of each one, the role that each one has in the moral order of life in our society. So, sometimes and often, we don't give importance to everyone in our society, simply because we disagree with ideas, thoughts, or even actions, we dismiss their validity, right? As I say, we as a society in general. So, this life in society, it is and should be provocative, stimulate movement, rethink the role of each one. The founder of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, he says that this thought that life in society is implicit to man. He says that we are undeniably social beings. And this can be considered our great ability compared to other animals. Because a lion can hunt and eat and live alone, but it also won't reproduce alone. And we can do that. Even bees live in a large society, each with its role, building something together, even though they're irrational. And in our society, when someone develops some technology, some new knowledge, It serves everyone. The cell phone. Today we speak here online. If no one had developed this technology and especially passed it on, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here and neither would any of us. So, we need to appropriate this knowledge that came before us to be able to grow, to bring progress, to bring the evolution of everyone. As for family ties, a French philosopher, Auguste Comte, he was born in France in 1978. He considered the family as the basic cell of society. And he wasn't wrong, it wasn't for nothing, because the whole process of evolution of human society, it starts with the family. In the family, we begin to develop our moral senses, the bond of love for others. We start by loving the mother, the parents, the siblings, the cousins and uncles, so that later we can love friends, have partners and a new family. So, without the family, regardless of what we consider as family, whether it's father, mother, whether it's grandfather, grandmother, whether it's just father, whether it's just mother, these bonds we create, these bonds of affection and knowledge, they arise with the family. So, it is the essential nucleus of our society, of all human societies, the family. So, it's important that we understand that we, as rational human beings, unlike irrational beings, we have this difference because of moral laws. Irrational animals, they have an instinct. A fish will be born and will know how to swim immediately. A giraffe will be born and in a short time will already be eating, walking, and running. But we are not like that. And we depend a lot, as babies, children, on parents, on adults, so that we can first survive, because our instinct alone will not make us grow. But also this bond persists for a long time, until adulthood, and then we still continue. We maintain ties with the family, with the closest people, with the general society, because this is an opportunity not only for us to progress materially, learn and transform, but also to transform ourselves, to take advantage of reincarnation and family ties, for example, to correct past mistakes, readjust with others in past debts, to help each other morally in our moral renewal, in our individuality. So, the relaxation of family ties is an exaltation of selfishness. In other words, it's when we are losing the opportunity in this existence. And this happens a lot today. We see the family dissolving, maybe because of selfishness, because it's difficult to live in society. Building a family that is solid, consistent, it's also difficult for us to accept the mistakes of others. So, for this reason, many choose to distance themselves, not to live in society anymore, to relax family ties, as they say. And increasingly, this, in some societies, has become natural. Children leave home, lose ties with their father, with their mother, with siblings, and that's okay. Now, how are we going to learn from these people? How are we going to be able to count on these people if we no longer have ties? This family bond, this love that unites us. We see that technology, progress has helped us a lot, but a clear example is when we go, for example, to a restaurant, there's the family, the father, the mother, children or whoever, together, but each one is on their cell phone, right? Looking and following their social networks. So, technology was wonderful to bring us all this, the technology of contact, of distant fifth, of being able to expand our messages to all societies. This only happened because we united for this. No man alone would be able to create all this. All this technology, the computer, the software, the networks we communicate on. So, this was very good. But, on the other hand, we also use all these networks, these advantages, to isolate ourselves. This is no different from what Kardec said earlier about isolation. Are we not isolating ourselves within a cell phone? Isn't this containing us, everything we are, right? Because many without their cell phones, without their contacts, without their networks, are simply alone, at home, without communicating, without interacting with others. And so remains the invitation to reflection for all of us, right? For what do we use this knowledge? How are we obeying the law of society? Is it that we are isolating ourselves, even though surrounded by people, but inside, alone? I end here. I think it's time, but with a phrase, a famous phrase, that I think many people have heard, that no man is an island. It's by a British poet, John Donne. He says that no man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. So that's it. It's a brief message. It's an invitation for us to reflect on what we want from our society. If we want society to grow as a whole, or if we want society to be just what we want, for everyone to be the same, without respect for diversity, inclusion, participation of all. Thank you, Lucas, for the explanation, for the reflections. Can you finish with the prayer? Sure, I can. Let's go. I invite everyone then, whoever wants to close their eyes. Let's calm down. Let's connect with our mentors, our friends, workers of the spiritual plane. First, thanking for another opportunity to be gathered, learning a little more about the gospel, the words and teachings of Jesus, the love of the Father for us. Humbly, we make ourselves available for work, for our transformation, and to serve everyone around us and the world that needs us for its progress. We thank you, Master Jesus, for all your sacrifice, for everything you left us, for everything you still always do for us, for your love, for your care, and for leading us to our Father, our Creator, to whom we connect with heart and spirit, asking that you illuminate us today and always with your light, your peace, your mercy. With all the love of your creation. Thank you, Lord. Be with us today and always, and so be it, thanks to God. Thank you, Lucas, once again. Thank you to everyone who participated with us virtually, and until the next meeting. See you later, we'll meet again.